Hello and welcome to the Farmer Supply Association Agri Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmer Supply Association. We are taping on June 14th, and it's pretty unusual. I've been doing this, since I think mid-90s, about almost 30 years, and it's unusual for me to tape inside during June, but for a good reason this time. We had pretty good rain this morning over much of the county and much of the area, and things are kind of sloppy. And when I looked at the radar, I was trying to find a place to tape, and it was just kind of muddy everywhere. And looked at the radar and looked like there was another system coming from the west. So I got a hold of David and said, let's just tape inside today. So that's the reason we're inside, is because we got some rain and it looks like more coming. So again, that's mainly a good thing, and we'll just talk to you from inside the building today. Just want to talk about what's going on in the crop situation. We had a good rain over much of the county this morning. We had been kind of a mixed bag. It had been, we got some good rains from Newport south back over the weekend, and things were in pretty good shape down there. But you get in the north part of the county, especially our area, Tuckerman, Swifton, up in that area, it was really dry. I was looking at some beans for a guy yesterday, and they'd been planted about 2 weeks ago, planted in pretty dry ground, and that seed was still laying there. Where they had moisture, they were merged and coming up and growing, but where they didn't have the moisture, they were still laying there. So it's been that dry up north, and some grass and other weeds in that field. And I told him, I said, man, it's no point in even spraying right now. As dry as it is, you're probably not going to get herbicide activity. But that's kind of changed today, and we've got moisture over much of the area, I think, right now, and that's mostly a good thing. Just want to give you a rice update today. It's still our main crop, even though it's not our number one acreage crop. It's still everyone's bread and butter, I think, in our footprint here with Farmer Supply Association. So just want to give you a rice update. Much of our rice crop is now at beginning internode movement, a green ring, if you will, and it's at that point. Not all of it's there yet. In fact, we had a call this morning from a guy, or one of our trucks was headed out to airflow some rice in part of our area. So, still a little bit of planting going on, although, again, most of our rice is, again, at the green ring or very near green ring. We'll get there in the next week or so. So, it opens up some new management things we've got to be thinking about this time of the season. First thing is what we call our mid-season nitrogen application. We put out our big shot pre-flood in most cases, but now when internode starts moving, we start thinking about that mid-season application. A different recommendation from what there was 10, 20 years ago. Now we make sure we wait until that rice plant has taken up that earlier big shot of nitrogen before we put the mid-season out. So, the recommendation from the university is you want two things to be there. You want to meet two criteria. You want the rice to be at least green ring. It can be quite a bit. It can be later certainly, but at least green ring. And you want it to be at least 4 weeks from that big pre-flood application. If you fertilize that way, some people still don't fertilize maybe that way. But if you put the big normal recommended pre-flood shot out, it's going to take about 4 weeks or so for the rice plant to take that pre-flood shot up. So we want to wait at least 4 weeks before we put that mid-season out there. So again, two criteria: at least 4 weeks from that first shot, and at least green ring. So keep that in mind. That's with our non-hybrid varieties. With the hybrids, of course, it's a different situation. We recommend they respond to a boot shot, so we recommend a boot shot. And really, we want a late boot shot. Really like to see a few heads popping before we put that boot shot out. The general recommendation on the regular varieties is 100 pounds of urea at this application. For the hybrid, 65 pounds. And I know everybody says, well, I'm paying for 100. Well, still, you're going to be wasting that extra 35 pounds of urea you've bought, even though you're paying that application fee, because all the research has shown the rice just doesn't respond to any higher rate than 65 pounds. So let's just keep it right there and go with that. Other big thing we think about now is some of the weed control. The weed control kind of changes right now. We're not talking about pre-emerge stuff anymore. We're not talking about killing small grass. Got 3 or 4 situations I want to talk about here. First is the bigger grass, and specifically we're talking about the big barnyard. It's that time of the year. I started seeing some last week where we start seeing some of that barnyard stick out the top of the canopy. We see it every year. I was afraid this year was going to be a little more than normal because we went through some dry weather. where number one, the pre-emerges didn't really get activated maybe as well as one guy called it, marginal activation, and some not the best activation we could have on our pre-emerge herbicides. And then we got dry, and post-emerge herbicides for grass, as you hear me say all the time, are just a crapshoot, and and if it's dry, they're even more of a crapshoot, and good chance they're not going to work. So I expected to see some grass come out the top. We're seeing it now. We'll see more over the next few weeks. So it's questionable whether you want to spend any money or not. I think it depends on how bad it is and your situation. If it's just scattered here and there, it's very cosmetic. If it's enough that's going to maybe take the rice down, you might want to try to get some suppression, obviously, and do something with it. So, but it's not always economical to try to do something with this bigger grass, because sometimes you just can't do anything with it much anyway. But if you're going to try, something, the university has a couple of main recommendations, and that's a Rice Star Regiment mix. And of course, if you're going to be using regiment, obviously you don't want any joint movement at all. That has to be applied before green ring. But that's a pretty good combination for bigger grass. The other one, if you're in the Clearfield system or the full page system, then Rice Star and either Beyond or Proscript. Seems like when you mix those two herbicides together, it makes them both better. Sometimes maybe one or the other is not as good as you would like, but if you mix both of those together, they have some synergism or something there that make them a little better. So again, Rice Star plus either Beyond or Proscript will be another option for big grass. Some people are still going to look at clincher, and it's hit or miss at best. But if you use clincher, I think you need to be looking at higher rates and possibly sequential applications, more than one application of the clincher to try to get any suppression, and that's what you're going to get there. So that's our grasses. Again, really think about it before you spend a lot of money on the grass herbicides, and whether you think whether it's worth it for you or not. The other, one of the other things I want to talk about is the annual sedges, and that's becoming, maybe some people consider it their number one weed already. I saw one consultant with a tweet about that the other day, that's his number one problem weed anymore, and that's the annual sedges. And we're talking about basically the rice flat sedge or white margin sedge, and the white margin sedge is really starting to come on and maybe take over in certain situations. So there, if you didn't get early control, or your pre's didn't work very well on the annual sedges like Bolero or Sharpen, well then you may be thinking about trying to do something on those right now, because they're going to be sticking out the top. And a certain way you look into the sun, you'll see every last plant of it. You look with the sun, you may not see anything, but then you go into the sun and you say, oh my, I've got a problem out here. So as far as choices for the annual sedges, the white margin or the rice flat sedge, Loint's number one probably as far as activity, but it's very difficult to get it applied. I mean, there's some places, some situations you can get Loint applied. If you can, that's my number one go-to. If you can't, then we take a step back and maybe something like a Basagran plus oil, crop oil, get some suppression with that. It may take 2 applications to really get, a good enough suppression for you in that situation. But that's kind of where you need to turn to if you can't get the Loint out there. 2,4-D can have some activity on rice flat sedge. Of course, you got to get in that 2,4-D window from right around beginning joint movement to half-inch internode for the rice flat sedge, or for the 2,4-D to be used without the increased risk of injury on your rice. So again, rice flat sedge. And again, quick identification. Rice flat sedge, if you grind those leaves up between your fingers and smell your fingers, then you're going to smell that kind of cedar-like smell that the leaves in the rice flat sedge has. On the white margin sedge, if you look at the back sides of the leaves, that midrib will be green, and the outside of that midrib will be kind of whitish, maybe even a kind of a silver-like, but that's how they get the white margin sedge identification. And if you look at the roots on the white margin sedge, you'll see some red roots down in there. They won't be a total red system, but you'll see some red roots down in there as well, especially early on. So that's some identification of both of those sedges. So again, Loint, or Basagran plus crop oil, or maybe 2,4-D, as the last thing there. Finishing up with the black seeds, Morning Glory, Coffee Bean Indigo. Of course, they're not that overly competitive unless they're really thick, but they will be. You'll get dockage, if they find enough in your sample when you take them to the dryer. So, that's a situation right there. We want to try to take care of those. 2,4-D is a great choice. If you can get in that 2,4-D window and you can get 2,4-D applied again, that's another situation where some places you might not be able to get it applied, maybe because of legalities, because it's illegal in certain areas, or the other thing is just you got to get in that window for control. So again, 2,4-D is my number one choice, especially for the coffee bean and the morning glory. It's not quite as good on indigo. In indigo, if you can get grandstand applied, and especially propanil grandstand is really my favorite. But again, that's one of those things that may be hard to get applied sometimes, so that puts you in a bind there. But again, grandstand or propanil grandstand for the indigo. Coffee bean, a little easier to control because we can use blazer, and it's usually, blazer is something we can get applied in most cases because it's, not harmful to rice, not harmful to beans. So blazer for the coffee beans, and that's really about all you're going to get out of it is coffee beans. But if you got coffee beans, then that's a go-to material right there. A couple other things for seed suppression, maybe on the indigo and coffee bean, maybe like grasp or permit can give you some suppression there. They're not going to kill them, but they might give you some seed head suppression. So, that's where we're at right now with our rice crop, kind of turning that page to that mid-season, the reproductive stage, and again, hopefully we can have some good weather. With rice, we like sunshine, we like moderate temperatures, and maybe we'll get that and finish this rice crop out, because we've had a pretty good start getting planted on time, early. Getting that fertilizer out on dry ground, getting good stands. We've had a lot of things go well for us in rice. So, I think the stage is still there for a good crop if the weather will help us finish out here. So, for more information, you can contact me through Farmer Supply Association. And this has been Randy Kopechka with your Farmer Supply Association Agri Report.